I messed up. I had one of the best months of vibe coding. I shipped multiple products, but then a surprise bill from Vercel came in for $800 after just 2 weeks. It was a jump scare for me. I had no idea it was coming, and it really got me thinking about the state of AI coding. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, as part of building journey kits, of course, I needed to deploy it. And Vercel was the option that my AI coding assistant told me to use. But here's the thing. Very similar to me not reading any of the code, I didn't think much about the services I was using either, how they were set up, or any of the configurations. I just said deploy. And by default, Vercel chose the highest cost machine to use for my builds and also some of the highest cost settings for my builds. Let me show you. So here was my first mistake. By default, Vercel chooses the turbo build machine, and that is an extremely beefy machine for builds. And it was very costly as well, but it also has elastic, standard, enhanced, and for my little project, I did not need the top tier build machine. So already I was getting charged the maximum possible rate for my builds. Look at this. I was getting charged 12.5 cents per build minute. And for comparison, I'm now on Elastic, which starts at 0.3 of a penny per minute. So a drastically lower price per minute for a build. Number two, I had concurrent builds. And let me tell you, because I was using AI to code, I was deploying dozens of times per day, often having duplicate builds. I would just deploy something, realize there was one little change I wanted to make, fix it, deploy it, and the last one was still going. And so I would have multiple builds going at the same time, all basically deploying the same thing. And I was just getting charged for all of them. So here's another thing I turned off. Instead of run all builds immediately, which is the Vercel default, I switched to disable on-demand concurrent builds. This means it builds everything sequentially, and what I can do is if I put out a second build while the first build is going, I can just say either wait or cancel the first build. That saved a lot of money as well. And I actually put out a post on X about this because those weren't the only problems. Those were the defaults from Vercel. I should have looked, but of course I was just moving so quickly and my AI coder was recommending everything, so I didn't look. And yeah, that's my fault. I messed up. And then there's something else. I also didn't take the time to think about why are my builds taking minutes? And so I put out this tweet. I said, well, this Vercel build came as an absolute surprise. And Theo jumped in and said, WTF is wrong with your build process? And we went back and forth and he actually gave some really good suggestions. Something is making those builds super slow, which is why the bill is so high, because I get charged per build minute. So if my builds take minutes, I'm getting charged more than if they take seconds. And there's no reason they should be taking minutes. But again, I wasn't thinking about this. I just wanted to ship as quickly as possible. And it wasn't until I received the bill where I thought, okay, maybe I need to take a second and try to optimize some of these settings. And there were actually a lot of other awesome people who jumped in on this thread and gave me suggestions for how to optimize the build. Now my builds take seconds and I'm also on the lowest tier. And so rather than being charged hundreds of dollars per week, now I'm only charged a couple dollars. So let me show you how I got the build time down quite a bit, and there's still even more room. So here is originally what it was taking. Every single deploy was deploying multiple times, and they were taking over 3 minutes each. Sometimes you could see here 4 minutes. And then after fixing it, now you can see each build is taking about 1 minute. But here's the thing also, somebody said, hey, you should be using GitHub hooks to do the build and then just use Vercel for the deploy. And so I did that as well. And all of these suggestions are just things I hadn't thought of. And it's not that I couldn't figure it out. It's that I was just moving so quickly, I didn't want to slow down and think about those things. And it's not until you receive the bill for $800 that you are going to slow down and think about these little optimizations. And by the way, I am a big fan of Vercel. And somebody from the Vercel customer support team DM'd me on Twitter and said, hey, you should just make a customer support ticket for this. And I haven't done it yet, but I will. And maybe they'll give me a refund, although originally I didn't even think I deserved it. This is my fault. These are the default settings for Vercel. I should have taken the time to look. And that's kind of the point of this whole video. And just like AI has preferences, I have preferences, like the sponsor of today's video. Context engineering is an incredibly important part of your AI stack. Making sure your AI has all of the data it needs to give you the best possible results is actually kind of a hard problem. And if you're just working in one document, sure, just give it that one document. It's easy. But imagine if you have thousands of documents and then you start mixing in videos and articles and other types of media. And as you're seeing from Gbrain and from Karpathy's LLM Wiki, people are building all of this stuff themselves, but it is not easy. That is where Recall 2.0 comes in. Recall 2.0 allows you to throw everything into this kind of ocean of data, and it can provide the right context at the right moment to your AI. With Recall 2.0, you can switch between chatting with your knowledge base and researching on the web. I can add all of my OpenClaw videos to my Recall knowledge base, ask what the best security practices are, and Recall will even give me timestamps that I can watch in the app. With an API and MCP, you can plug this into any system that you're already using and building. And the best part, you're not locked into one model. So go check out Recall. It's a great product. Use MB25 to get 25% off, and I'll drop the link down below in the description. Thanks again to Recall. Now back to the video. And so let me broaden the scope of what I'm talking about here. How did I actually get here? Around 4 or 5 months ago, something changed in the world of AI coding. Opus 4.5 dropped, and coding agents just got so good to the point that a lot of people started shipping code at ridiculous speed without actually reviewing any of the code manually. In fact, the Anthropic Claude Code team and the leader, Boris Cherny, said, I don't write any code by hand anymore. And so all of a sudden, we're having this exponential growth of code being written, which is awesome. It allows people like me to build things that would have taken months in just a few days. Peter Steinberger, the founder of OpenClaw, also said the same thing. Something happened about 5 months ago and he's shipping his code without reading it. And that seems to be the trend. And in fact, it's physically impossible to review AI code. Hold that thought. I'm going to get back to that later in this video. So I am now able to write more code than ever. I'm able to build products faster than ever. But also at the same time, AI is choosing a lot of the services that I use, and I'm thinking about them less. So Vercel is a great example. Resend, which is an email sending platform, gets recommended to me in every project that I build. Fly.io, Railway, all of these projects continue to get recommended to me by my coding agent. And so I just say, great, let me just use that. And I don't think much else about it. I don't go in and tune the settings. I don't think about how my use case might fit into a certain plan on one of these services. I don't even think about the dependency risk of some of these services. And that's super important. I've started multiple software companies in my life, and platform risk or dependency risk was something that I thought about so often. It was so important. How long has a company been around for? What's their uptime? Does their product or service fit my needs exactly? How good is their support? I don't think about any of these things anymore. And now, to be fair, the projects that I'm building now are very low stakes. It's just me vibe coding something that I find fun, and I'm going to release it to the world. But if you're a company and you're looking at Anthropic and how fast they're shipping, and you're trying to replicate that speed, you're probably just letting AI make a lot of these decisions for you. And you're probably not thinking about the platform dependence risk. And so there's actually a lot to unpack here. One, GEO is incredibly important. GEO is kind of like SEO, but it's making sure that your website or service shows up in generative AI results. So the fact that these services like Fly.io, like Vercel, like Resend continue to be the first thing that coding agents recommend means they are growing like crazy. And they are. I mean, look at the Resend founder and CEO. He just posted this a few days ago. We just crossed 2 million users on Resend. Just 4 months ago, we were celebrating 1 million. The definition of a developer is changing, and it's changing fast. So multiple things are happening and they're compounding on each other. More people are developing than ever, which is fantastic. And then also AI is choosing which services to recommend. And guess what? They're choosing resend. And so a lot of these services are really benefiting from this AI coding boom in multiple ways. But again, bringing it back to what happened to me, I'm thinking about which services I choose less and less, and I'm depending on AI to make that choice for me. In fact, I use resend. Now let's broaden the scope even further. We are writing more code than ever. We are offloading more of our decisions to AI during the coding process, during the building process. And this is both good and bad. And that's the crux of what I want to talk about. On the one hand, we have more people building things than ever. Software is becoming cheaper and more accessible, and we're writing more code than ever. But at the same time, we're actually understanding the code less than ever. And maybe that's okay, but maybe not. We have companies like Anthropic who seemingly have figured out how to ship at absolutely insane speed. They have new features and new products launching multiple times a day. In fact, Twitter user ChatGPT21 put together a nice chart about shipping speed, and Anthropic obviously has something going on where they figured it out. They have shipped 13 features and or products in the first 2 weeks of April. That is nearly one per day, which is insane. And that is much more than OpenAI, Google, or even XAI. And so they're moving incredibly fast. But here's the thing. It is physically impossible to review AI code. You can review lines here and there, but as the amount of code being written increases because of artificial intelligence, our ability to review the code decreases significantly. There's just no physical way to actually review all those lines of code. And so some people tell me, oh, well, hey, Matt, that's okay. You don't need to review all the lines of code. And I say, well, oh, that sounds great. But how do you even review all of the functionality, even if it's in natural language? I know when I'm writing a spec, AI is giving me back recommendations. Those recommendations are enormous essays about how things work. And even then, even when I take all that time, which does take a lot of time to read all of those natural language specs, the thing that actually gets deployed isn't always what I understood it to be. Okay, so that's a really important point. Things have shown up in my project where I said, I don't remember ever asking for that. And not reviewing code is not a bug. It is a feature. It is intentional. It is where the industry is headed. If you look at all of the major AI coding products, Cursor, Codex, Claude Code, they are all moving in a direction where the design pattern is very clear, moving away from actually seeing the code. So you remember IDEs, right? They're coding editors. They are interfaces that allow you to write code. And they used to primarily focus on code. And then they started to change. You used to hit tab for auto completion, and that was great. But as these models got better at coding, they started to transform. The design pattern started to change. All of a sudden, rather than tab completion, we had a chat interface, right? So you can just type, build me the thing, and it was great. But we had this big window in which you were supposed to look at the code being built. And then Codex and Claude Code kind of changed things. They started to de-emphasize the actual code viewing experience. And then we started seeing the same thing in cursors. And then all of a sudden, the window to actually review the files in your code base started to go away. And we have the new version of Cursor, which kind of resembles Codex and Claude Code Desktop. It is a chat interface, and viewing code is secondary. Then all of a sudden we went from having a chat over here and being able to read the code over here. You had your directory list right here. Then we have the new version of Cursor, and this is what that looks like. Now, you can still review the code, but it, again, has been completely de-emphasized. It is a chat window. We have all the different chats on the left. We have the main section, which is really just a chat conversation in the middle, and if you want, you can open it up on the right, and it's a mixture of different things, but you can review the code there. And so in the new version of Cursor, there's essentially very little to no code actually being shown. In fact, and I actually really like this feature, they're showing you what the actual product looks like in a browser, not the code. They're saying, don't worry about the code, just check out the final product. And so that's what we're seeing here. And if we scroll through, there is all this work being done but very little code actually being shown. And it's the same thing in Codex. We have a bunch of code being written, but not shown. It just says, here are the files changed. Here are how many lines of code I added. Here are how many lines of code I deleted. Here are the specific files. And if I click into it, I can actually see the code, but only if I click into it. That is kind of the secondary viewing option at this point. So that is the trend. We are moving away from reading actual code. And so a lot of people that I talk to this about tell me, well, Matt, it's the same thing as abstractions, right? At one point in time, we wrote code in binary, and then from binary, we abstracted away to machine code. And then from machine code, we had more readable languages. And then on, we abstracted away until we got to the final layer of abstraction, which is natural language, which is where we are now. So Matt, it's just another level of abstraction. Why is this any different? Well, my argument is we're shipping code we don't fully understand. And it's not only the code we don't understand, we don't fully understand the functionality we're building. The way that things are explained to us might not be exactly how they're coded. And there is a disconnect between natural language, which is imperfect, it is fuzzy, and traditional code, which is perfect. It is not fuzzy. You say 1 + 1 = 2. But that's not how natural language works. So are we shipping slop? Maybe, but maybe not. I think the bigger problem is that we don't fully understand what we're shipping. The models are getting better. They're writing better code. They are getting better at understanding our intentions with less description from us. They're getting better at understanding large code bases. So we're definitely heading to a world where these models are writing a tremendous amount of code that we don't necessarily need to review line by line. And I mean, we're already there. The companies that are on the frontier of shipping are not reading their code. You have AI writing code, AI reading code, and the person right here not understanding what's going on under the hood. Definitely. And so where does that lead us? Well, let me talk about why traditional code looks the way it does. If you look at traditional code, especially modern languages, Ruby and Python, they look like natural language. They are still syntax languages. They are still deterministic by nature, but they are easy to read for human eyes. And there's a reason they were written like that. There's a reason they were designed like that, because humans are actually really bad at writing and reading code. We need it to be easy. We can't look at binary or machine code and just easily understand what's going on. So more and more languages have transitioned to look like natural language. And then, of course, the final jump to actual natural language as code. But here's the thing. AI is really good at reading and writing code. And as we progress down this path where AI is writing the vast majority of code, more code than ever, they are still writing code in a language that is optimized for human readability. But that might not be what's optimal for AI readability. In fact, it's not. There's this potential future in which AI writes its own language, optimized for AI to read and write that code. But if it's optimized for AI, there's also a chance we won't be able to understand it. Maybe there's just some crazy design of code where we just can't understand it. There's just no way our brains can comprehend it. And AI is writing it, it's explaining it to us in natural language that we can understand, but maybe it's not explaining it accurately. And so that outcome worries me. And so to tie it all back to the Vercel bill, remember that? That's how we started. Knowing the fundamentals of code still very much matters. Knowing when you're deciding on a service, why you should choose that service. What are the different configurability options? Knowing the trade-offs of certain design patterns for code. These things still very much matter. And if you're building production grade systems, you need to invest in understanding them. So if you're a vibe coder and you have no history of writing code, start to learn the basics, and it's going to help you tremendously. So we're in this weird world where I'm shipping more than ever. I'm having more fun doing so than ever, but I also have this anxiety around the code I'm writing. I know it mostly works, and I mostly understand how it works, but not fully. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.